Welcome to Tech Topics brought to you by Cybervenger. We help keep small businesses stay protected and compliant with cutting-edge cybersecurity and IT solutions.
Hello and welcome. My name is Andy. I'm the managing consultant for Cybervenger. Today's topic is cloud backups. Now, we did another video not too long ago that went over backups and some of the consideration, terminology, that sort of thing. We're going to kind of skim over some of that as we've already covered it and focus just on terminology and concepts specific to cloud backup. First, of course, we have to define what is cloud backup. And it's not as easy as you might think. Cloud services exist to store data, like Amazon Web Services S3 product, for example. That's not cloud backup, even if you're putting your data in that storage. What makes something cloud backup, at least by our definition, is that the engine, your service, is running in the cloud, controlled and managed in the cloud. And that's very important from a ransomware readiness standpoint. There's a terminology that we coined here at Cybervenger, or at least I believe we did, push versus pull backups. A push backup is not ideal anymore in the age of ransomware. A push backup is going to take your data from the machine it's on, and that machine has software, has the engine doing the backups on it as well, and it pushes the data somewhere. The problem with that is in ransomware, of course, if you have a good backup, you don't have to pay the ransom. You can restore and go about your day. They know this, right? The attackers, so they're going to work very hard to make sure that your backups are destroyed. If someone manages to compromise your servers, they're going to look at those servers and see what's on it. And it's very easy to see that you have Veritas Backup Exec or Veeam Backup and Replication or ArcServe or any number of dozens of well-known backup software. And when you do, you can plainly see all the backup jobs right there, what's being backed up. It gives the attacker a roadmap to go after what's important and what to break. You can see where the data is being stored, and you can disrupt all of that. So you really don't want to use a pull style backup. Now, push and pull is not necessarily cloud specific. You can make a pull style backup in your environment without using cloud. For example, if you had a different VLAN and you had a completely separated server with a different operating system, certainly different credentials, such that a compromise of your local systems, of your domain credentials, of all your production servers, gets the bad guy no closer to the data stored in the backups. So your backup data, your backup system would pull data off of it onto the server. So the backup server is completely separated, it has a firewall, that kind of thing. That is exactly what happens when you have a cloud backup. Your cloud is up somewhere on the internet on another connection that a vendor is managing. You can access it through a portal, but you don't access it from the servers being protected. You might see an agent loaded on it, but it doesn't give you any idea of how often, what their attention is. It gives you no control over that data. And that's why that's so important. It helps protect you in a ransomware-like scenario. The bad guys can't destroy your data because it's not here. So that's one of the major advantages of cloud backups, is that it's a pull style, right? So that's what we're calling a cloud backup. Now, of course, you can store your data in the cloud, and a lot of cloud vendors do. I think most people who are interested in cloud backups think about storage in the cloud, so we're going to kind of take it from that frame of reference. With that, though, that does introduce an interesting problem: bandwidth. Internet connections are typically around 100 megabits per second versus a local network connection that's around 1,000 megabits per second, also called gigabit. And it's exactly like it sounds. The unit of measurement is, in fact, consistent, and it really is 10 times faster to move your data off your server onto a local storage than it is to get it up to the cloud. To make matters worse, that's only with synchronous internet connections. There are also asynchronous. In fact, they're very common. Most home internet are asynchronous. What that means is you could pull data down at 100 megs per second, but you only can push data back up around 10 megs a second or 20 or whatever it happens to be. But you get the idea. You don't have as much bandwidth going up, which is what's going to affect your backup specifically. Web surfing doesn't really use upload. You can web surf, you can stream audio, video, whatever, and it'll feel fast, even though you only have that speed of one channel. On the upside, it's not, very limited compared to what they advertise. So you want to look for a synchronous connection if you're going to be doing cloud backups, if you can help it. If not, you got to take into account how much bandwidth you have upload when deciding whether you can back up your data. Oftentimes with the cloud backup, you're going to replicate your initial set of data. Let's say you have 5 terabytes. You'll copy that entire set up to your new cloud provider and cloud storage, once, and it'll take you about a week to get it done, or sometimes more. And that's kind of tough to do. But once it's there, you continue to back up changes only, incremental backups. Incrementals are an old concept, but modern cloud backups are very granular about that incremental. Previously, you might have a 100 meg file and you change a tiny couple kilobytes of it, and then you have to upload the entire 100 megs to backup. That would be an increment. Now they do bit level, so you can change just a couple of kilobits that changed, and that saves on bandwidth. That's really important. Cloud backups are very bandwidth optimized because they have to be. The other consideration with cloud backups are, if you get the data up there, how do you get back down? Two ways to do this. It could take a week to get your data if you have 5 terabytes over a regular internet connection. Should be a little faster because the whole asynchronous thing I mentioned earlier, but it's still going to take quite a while. Most providers, being that they, can ship a hard drive usually to speed things up, but that's still an overnight process. You're not going to get it instantly. So my favorite thing to do is to do your backups to a local drive, still isolated from the rest of the network, still not, no credentials or authentication in common with your production network, so not part of the domain, that sort of thing, and controlled by the cloud backup. You back up there so that you have something locally to work with, so you can restore quickly. But if you replicate to the cloud, then if the building burns down, or is otherwise unavailable or destroyed, you can still get your data, even if it takes a little longer. So that gets us into disaster recovery, which is also a little off topic. I kind of want to steer away from that. What I want to focus on today is reviewing 2 vendors that we've used before, that I had a personal experience with, so I have some, credentials to talk about it because I've used it, right? And we're going to go over iDrive and we're going to go over Carbonite. Both great companies, great products, a little different spin on them. I think iDrive was at least initially more of a home user kind of backup, and Carbonite's more business. That seems to be changing. We did some reviewing of the products in question prior to this video, of course, and there's a lot of new stuff that I'm not even familiar with, so I can't review it very well. You may have to check that out yourself or call a sales representative. iDrive, for example, has a bare metal restore. Now, I'll talk about what different types of backups there are in just a second. Bare metal is one of them. Bare metal is designed to recover everything. Say your computer is completely destroyed and you need to start from scratch. Bare metal means you're going to get a brand new server, different hardware. You're going to restore everything, including the operating system, the applications, and your data. So it's not just your data. So the different types of backups that you can have are file by file. Think Word, Excel, Adobe Acrobat files, AutoCAD files, that kind of thing. Applications. You can have Microsoft SQL. You can have Active Directory. You can have other applications that are... they're not just data files, and you can't back them up the way you would a file-by-file backup. It won't work. SQL, for example, if you try backing up the files involved in a SQL server, when you go to restore them, you're going to get garbage back. You won't be able to run the SQL server. Believe me, I've tried. I've had people use the wrong backup and tried to salvage it. It's very tricky. There are poor man's ways of getting around that, like doing a SQL dump every night and then backing up the dump files. But by and large, you really want to have an application-aware backup to do SQL and other applications. And we're going to talk about how that affects cloud pricing in a moment when we go through our exact review. And then finally, of course, you have image. And that's kind of what that bare metal is. It gets an entire image. So it's one thing to have your data, but you can't do anything with your data unless you have your systems configured, all your applications back and working, all your credentials back so people can actually log in, that sort of thing, and then restore your data. And that could be a very tedious process. If you go think back to when your network was originally built, how long did that take? Probably had your IT guys out there for a while, right? You don't want that in a disaster scenario, so you want image backup. That's like a third kind of thing. So bare metal is meant to restore hardware. You could do VM guest level backups. So without getting too off in the theoretical, let's make it practical and point at iDrive and see what the features they have. And we'll talk about the pricing, how that's affected. So if we look down here, look at our first entry, and we're talking iDrive Mini. That is as cheap a backup as you could possibly get. It's 100 gigs of data. It's usable in some cases, especially if like a solopreneur, you're a brand new entrepreneur, freelance consultant, that sort of thing. 100 gigs might be all you need, and it's $2.95 a year. It's unimaginably cheap. You have no excuse not to get this, right? I mean, the electricity on your laptop probably costs more than backing up your data. So that's what you would do if you just have some Office documents and you just want to make sure that you're protected and as affordably as possible. That's the backup you would choose. And iDrive is great for this. I use them a lot. I don't usually use the mini plan. I use the next size up, the professional plan. That's about $5 a month, rounding here, $659.62 a year, as you see there. But it's a great backup because it's large. You can get 5 terabytes of storage. That's a pretty good amount of storage. You could back up a pretty decent-sized company. I've seen 15, 20 user companies, even bigger, that have less than 5 terabytes of data. So that's a nice feature there for a very, very affordable price. But here's the kicker. It's only file by file. So if they have an SQL database, or maybe we're still running Exchange on-premise, still folks still do that in some cases, or you have Active Directory, you can't back that up with file by file. So you got to do a business kind of grade. Now, iDrive has that as well. If you look over here, they have their business offering. The business offering is actually a little bit more expensive, at least on appearances. It's rounding up, it's $75 a year. Great, that's awesome. Let's do it. But if you look in the details here, yes, it says that it supports Exchange and SQL and all that such. But it's only 250 gigs for that price. You go from 5 terabytes to 250 gigs. It's a tiny fraction of the storage space. So you kind of see the kind of effect that those applications have on your backup costs. You got to consider that when you think about getting applications for your company. So that's iDrive, and that's the offerings, quick pricing that they have. There's other stuff they have. As I said, they do have an enterprise offering here, and they have the bare metal and such, and it's a lot to look into. A lot of options they have for that sort of thing, more than they used to. For the enterprise stuff, I tend to go more Carbonite, which we'll get to in just a second. But I also wanted to talk about their compliance, and this is one thing I really give them kudos for, as they put a lot of thought into that. Encryption. Your data needs to be stored and encrypted so that nobody can, even if they get a hold of your backup data, they can't do anything with it, right? And it needs to be stored at a certain level of encryption. Not all encryption is created equal. AES 256 is about the highest encryption level you're going to find commercially available. There are higher stuff in existence, but this is the most practical that you're going to get. They use that. 128, which is a little lower, is the minimum standard that the Department of Defense wants its CUI vendors to be using. So anybody who has controlled unclassified information needs to store that information in AES 256 as part of the NIST 800-171 standard, which we have a video on. Actually, we have more like a series of videos on that standard. It's very in depth, but this would pass that standard. Not only does it store that in that standard, but it lets you have an option where you can keep the keys yourself, and the vendor doesn't even have access to that backup. The downside, of course, is if you lose the keys, you're lost your data. So don't lose the keys. You're responsible for that. But it's good to think about how compliance is affected with the backup vendor that you're selecting. Another final note with iDrive, they are located in the United States. The data you back up is stored on servers in the United States. Again, that's key for the Department of Defense compliance if you're a NIST 800-171 covered entity. The next vendor we have, Carbonite. They are also a United States company, but they were purchased by a Canadian company. I believe all the data is in the United States. I believe it's stored onshore, but I'm less confident about that lately than I am about iDrive in that regard. So that's something to kind of look into. They do talk a lot about FERPA and HIPAA regulations and other compliance, so they're also very compliance-minded. Quick review here. You see they do encryption in 128-bit for their lower plans, 256 optional with the higher plan. If you have more enterprise stuff, you're going to need the higher plan. You need to spend more money to make sure you get the better encryption and the SQL backups and the Active Directory backups and all the application stuff, as well as bare metal. I've also used Carbonite frequently with the backup to disk to cloud methodology. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. That's kind of why we're recommending them. I've used them for that more often at various vendors, and they're pretty effective that way. You don't need a local disk. You can go straight to cloud, but that does give you a challenge during restore time, as we talked about with bandwidth. So that is basically the features and considerations you have in cloud for your existing environment. But there's another thing to think about if we're going to be talking about cloud backups, and that is cloud backups. Your cloud, or what's backing up your QuickBooks Online, what's backing up your Office 365. Those applications also need to be backed up. I know what you're thinking. What do you mean you need to be backed up? They're a cloud provider. They're supposed to take care of that stuff for me. Isn't that the point of cloud? Yes and no. Most cloud vendors have some kind of backup, more designed to protect them from a problem. It doesn't protect you. Consider the following scenarios. I had a customer one time that had an internet connection for me. Let's just say a major carrier. And that major carrier applied their check to the wrong account. So they had a credit for one service and they were late on another. Simple billing mistake, right? This kind of stuff happens all the time. You haggle out, you fix it, and whatever. But there was a kind of fight going on, and they actually ended up shutting the customer off. Now, that wasn't a big deal because it wasn't a line that was critical to them. But imagine that was your software as a service application. Imagine it was 365. Imagine that was whatever cloud service you're using that you count on. And imagine worse that your data is there. Now, all those vendors, and of all the contracts I've read, do have clauses in there to say if you don't pay your bill long enough, they could delete your data. They have a right to do that. I mean, it makes sense, right? Your data on their hard drive is costing them money. And if you don't pay, right? Normally, that's totally understandable. But in the case of a billing dispute or something unintentional, you might lose all your data purely for something totally beyond your control. Or what if you get a legal hold? If maybe they get sued or you get sued or somebody, confiscates that server, or the FBI is investigating a giant hacking ring and they shut it down and you can't get to your data now. Or they've been compromised by bad guys and the bad guys shut down their data. I mean, they have the same kind of technological problems and cybersecurity issues that you do. Or maybe they go bankrupt or go out of business. I've had people who had their data stored in a data co-location center, and that data co-location center went bankrupt and they seized all the assets, including the assets that belonged to the people who were hosting it there. And they were shut down till lawyers all got involved, and that took a lot of time. So you want to have a cloud-to-cloud backup. That way you can recover, you have control of your data. Cloud is not a bad thing. You just need to take these into consideration. So there's another term that I think that we have coined here at Cybervenger. I call it the off-vendor backup. Just kind of analogous to the off-site backup of but it's important to make sure you have a backup of your cloud vendor that you control from a different vendor. You don't want to count on your cloud vendor to back themselves up. That's the fox guarding the henhouse, right? If you think about it that way. So you want to be in charge of your own backups. And that's a pretty good feature set, a pretty good idea of the considerations for backups for you to think about. Of course, if you have any other questions, or maybe you got a backup vendor that you usually think is great, they have awesome pricing, great feature set for the value for the money, whatever, put it in the comments. I'd love to know. We're always looking for new software and technology to expand our offerings, to help our customers better. If you find somebody that's great and we're inspired, maybe we'll do a video on them. So put that in the comments. We'd appreciate that. Also, if you are looking for backups, you got to think about who's doing the backup, who's doing the labor, who's doing restore testing. I mean, how do you know if it works if you haven't tested it, right? That's a whole nother video, disaster recovery testing and such. But we have programs ourselves in-house where we are your backup company, and we use another tool, kind of an honorable mention here, Acronis. We use Acronis internally. It's meant for ISPs. They have offerings, I think, directly as well, but we have a great MSP program. So when we take care of our customers, we use their backup most typically. Then that's something we could talk to you guys about as well. If you ever want to reach out and need help with your backups, feel free to comment or talk to us. And that's a great option as well. I didn't want to get too infomercially on that. These videos are supposed to be informative, not quite shamelessly self-promoting here. So that's what we got for this week. That's it. Backups in a nutshell for cloud backup. I'm Andy. I'm the managing consultant, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next video. And have a great and wonderful week.
Thanks for watching. We hope this video has provided valuable information to you. Be sure to share this video with other small business owners to spread the word about the importance of cybersecurity. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this. If you want more information about cybersecurity, visit us at www.cybervenger.com.